In this video, we're going to take a look at the Waterman Graduate. Let's jump straight to the end with my thoughts on this pen. This is not a pen that I had actually purchased myself. This was purchased for me as a gift from a friend, which will explain a little bit why it's among my pens. It is certainly not one of my favorite ones to write with, but that's because it's very thin and very slick to hold on to. I do find that my fingers slip down and I have to readjust. This also, with it being thin, causes my hand to cramp, where by the time I reach the end of a full page of writing, I really do feel it in my hand, and that can be its own problem. Now, I don't mind how the nib feels while I write. It's the pen itself and its dimensions are not something that I really go for. And some of my thinner pens, I have the same issue where it causes a bit of hand cramping, and any of that discomfort while you're writing really does take from the writing experience. Now, with that being said, I do think that this is a very good pen for someone that's used to ballpoints or pencils to get into the fountain pen world, because it's more the size that they would be used to, which is generally, as I would think of it, a good thing, because thicker pens, before being in fountain pens, people think of for small children. Now that we know how I feel about the Waterman Graduate, let's see how I got to that opinion, starting with the unboxing. The Waterman Graduate came in a box like this, containing a box like this. This is out there as that kind of graduation present, the graduate by name. So while packaging isn't why you get a pen, I do think that the packaging could have looked a little bit nicer, since they're trying to really make it appeal as the graduation present. A little bit more presentation might have been nice. With the pen out of the box, we need to get to the nib. Now, as long as it doesn't take 20 turns to uncap a pen, I generally don't care. So, how many turns does it take to uncap this pen? The Waterman Graduate is a pull cap. I think snap caps are a perfect thing for students. So somebody graduating high school, going to college, this could be a very good option for them, because there's no dealing really with the cap, and it lets you take notes and pause in your notes easier, and capping your pen, no big deal. This gets us to the nib. This pen has a steel fine nib on it. I don't generally have any kind of problem with the smaller nibs. They don't bother me. I do prefer, personally, a larger nib, but the reason for that is it lets me get my hand farther away while I'm writing, letting me get less of that hand fatigue that I mentioned earlier. Now, let's ink this pen up. This Waterman Graduate has been fitted with a standard international cartridge, which holds approximately 1.7 milliliters of ink. The ink for today is Sailor Studio 460. This pen did not come with a converter, and it also did not come with a cartridge, which left me wondering, because as I understand it, Waterman uses the proprietary converters, and I managed to wedge a standard international in there, and it's in pretty tight and not really coming out, so it will fit. As a habit, I don't normally post my pens, but some pens need to be posted to be used comfortably, and some people prefer to post their pens. It does post deep enough and secure enough to be able to use it. It doesn't stick out ridiculously past on the hand. If you did not want to post it, it's right at the line of where I would not want the shortest that I would want a pen that I would use unposted. Again, I don't post very frequently, but this one, even though I'm not really a poster, I do use posted. If you enjoy videos like this, then be sure to hit the subscribe button. Now, the important part, the writing sample. As I mentioned, while I was writing, I did experience some hand cramping through just this single page that I'm writing. And that's a problem when you think about a student where, as a student, I wrote many pages of notes in a single lecture. And I don't know if I would have been able to do it and keep up with this pen. It would have forced me to write less of what I wanted to, perhaps missing some of the information that I was really after. Now, the writing experience itself is perfectly good. There is a bit of feedback, but it is a fine nib, so with fine nibs, you expect some of that feedback, and you definitely get it. As a pen where somebody may be starting with fountain pens, the feedback is also a very good thing to have, much more reminiscent of a pencil. This very much feels like a pencil to be writing with. I don't see that as a bad thing. I do enjoy the feedback that's there. It's not scratchy, not at all. And it does give a very tiny line, which is nice. While it's a fine, I might even say it writes kind of like an extra fine, which again, for somebody getting involved in fountain pens, definitely a bonus for here in America, where people aren't used to writing with thicker lines. So I see this as a great option for somebody to look into starting out in fountain pens. That being said, the only place I've ever come across this pen is on Amazon and Walmart online. Neither of those places are particularly where I like to do my shopping. Now for something a bit more standard in comparing writing size. I use Namiki Blue to do this. Now here it is with a Yovo Extra Fine on the left, medium in the middle, and a 1.1 stub on the right. As I said, this fine writes a little bit more like an extra fine. So you can see here that it really did come up with a bunch of the nibs that were much finer in their writing. Again, not a bad thing, just really kind of how it is. It's for you to decide if it's good or bad. But how does this nib compare to other nibs that I've used in writing size? Looking at the writing of a Waterman Graduate with a fine nib, here it is next to a Kaweco Brass Sport with a fine nib, an Airmail Regal, which writes like a fine, a Conklin Word Gauge with a fine nib. This is a Noodler's Charlie, which writes like a fine, and a Lamy All-Star with a fine nib. So it isn't a review without some size comparisons. Here it is capped, here it is uncapped, and here it is posted. This isn't a short pen in itself. It's not long. I would say it's fairly average sized. It's the thinner girth of the pen that I do find some difficulty with. So if you prefer a thin pen, this is perfect. But if you really want a little thicker pen, then I might avoid this one. Before we can ink this pen with a new ink, we need to clean it out. Be sure to check out the next pen review when we take a look at the Sailor 1911 Large Ringless Epinard. If you want to be able to support not just my channel, but any reviewer, then when you make a purchase, be sure to tell that retailer where you heard about it. Thanks for watching.